The present study was created with the aim of analyzing the linguistic structure history of the newspaper. We will analyze in particular the role that digitization has played in its evolution. Through the interviews addressed to the translator and journalist Alice De Carli, to Professor Marilyn Scopes and Professor Etienne Chelstrete, we will deepen some of the digital changes, both in journalism and translation. First of all, it is important to state that the newspaper has always represented the social context of the different historical periods, thus adapting linguistically and methodologically to society. The language of journalism has in fact undergone various changes, from a complex and ineffective language due to the absence of linguistic unification, we have moved on to a deliberately cryptic and manipulative language linked mainly to the festive spirit, and we have arrived at the current one, a simple language that is increasingly close to people. Each newspaper, however, outlines its own characteristics, taking into account many factors, such as its relationship with the territory or with its readers, but it still has some common linguistic characteristics that it has acquired and affirmed over time, such as expressivity, nominal style, direct speech, aggressive and effective titling, commonplaces, etc. As for its methodological evolution, digitization is the factor that has most influenced the changes in the newspaper. With technological innovations, newspapers have in fact begun to respond to the emergence of new electronic devices, publishing their articles in social networks or through the creation of web pages. We are therefore talking about the transition from traditional journalism to web journalism. Web journalism then contributed to the birth of citizen journalism, or journalism made by those who were previously just news readers. In fact, in this context, the reader acquires an increasing role and voice. The medium that has most favored this phenomenon is the blog. In my work, I have highlighted the advantages that can be drawn from it, analyzing it more specifically from a journalistic point of view, since the latter is presented as a sort of personal diary through which you can bring out your thoughts about an event. Alice De Carli, as a web content creator, has however brought out another very important function of the blog, that of presenting oneself and consequently one's job. According to her words, it is in fact a container of personal projects that in turn become a mirror of one's own person and one's own abilities. And this mirror is made available to users, or rather potential customers, who gain our trust through the personal evaluation of our online content. But if, on the one hand, digitization has allowed the figure of the journalist to evolve and the newspaper to reach a wider and wider audience, it should unfortunately be noted how much it has contributed to the spread of fake news. In fact, one of the most interesting phenomena of the link between journalism and the web concerns the opportunity given by the web in the diffusion of news through forms of sharing based on the logic of virality. These articles are in fact written through the use of invented, misleading, or distorted information. They are published with a precise objective, that of attracting the reader. I then wanted to talk about translation in a context of connection with journalism, first analyzing the similarities between the two professions and then the impact of the digital changes that have also been evident in this profession. To do so, it is necessary to introduce the concept of trans-editing, according to which the role of the translator joins that of the editor. In fact, according to scholars Bielsa and Basnet, In order to translate in the journalistic field, a translator must become a journalist and be able to recognize and prioritize the most important news in the context of arrival. Alice Di Carli's position seems to be different. As both journalist and translator, she stated how different the two professions are, in her opinion, in the way of doing and creating communication, and how different the approach to a text is also, because the translator is confronted with the written text and then with the word in a movement from inside to outside, while the journalist must first experience the word and what happens in it, and then repropose it on paper. In conclusion, it can be said that the two practices, journalism and translation, present various similarities in the process of collecting, selecting, reinterpreting, and modifying information, but they differ in the choices to be applied in these processes, which for journalism are linked to canons set by the newspaper for which an article is written, while for translation they are linked to the passage from the source culture to the target culture. We therefore shift the focus to how digitization has affected this profession through interviews with Professor Scopes and Professor Schellstrate. I asked both of them the same questions, and the two experiences, as we could imagine, present many similarities between them. The two professors then talked about how they experienced it firsthand, the beginning of the digital age, and how the great digital revolution is represented by the birth of the Internet. The first difference concerned the delivery of the material to be translated, therefore from its physical delivery to its online delivery. Another change has affected the research modality inherent to the translations to be carried out, from searches on paper encyclopedias to searches on the web. From a linguistic point of view, however, we were able to see that there were no drastic changes. As Professor Scopes said, the language is constantly evolving, and has always been so, since even before the birth of the Internet. The Internet has therefore certainly favored the coining and diffusion of new terms, as newspapers have done, but it has not represented a real linguistic revolution in the world of translation. The same can be said for journalism, because both in the one and in the other profession, digitization has had a strong impact, but the evolution that has resulted has been more evident from a methodological rather than linguistic point of view, because the latter is such a slow and gradual process that is unconsciously acquired by all of us. Therefore, just as society is constantly evolving, language, which is the mirror of society, never stops evolving.